Mr. Kellner, will you call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Burke.
Here.
President Bush.
Here.
Councilmember Fortner.
Here.
Councilmember McGreevy.
Here.
Councilmember Rickards.
Here.
Councilmember Winston.
Here.
Mayor Deutsch.
Here.
Councilmember Panopoulos as well.
Oh, Councilmember Panopoulos is absent.
Okay. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Not expecting them. I have no comments at this time. Mayor, you have comments?
Just to announce, remind everyone, tomorrow is First Friday in the Borough. It's great if you can come out and support your local shops and businesses, and there's a number of events going on. There's an open house at Fusion, there is events going on at Sweet Mabel, and at the Greeks there is an awareness of an organ donation for one of our neighbors. So there's an event to help learn about organ donation and help support one of our neighbors. So come on out and join us and have fun.
Thank you. Let's move on to public comment. Anyone in the room like to make a public comment?
I have one. I'm Robert Weisford, 301 Windsor Avenue, Apartment C, Margaret. Good evening, Mayor Deutsch, President Bush, council members, Chief Strain, and borough managers. It's nice to be here. I'm here not personally, but I'm here as the chair of the Friends of Margaret Green Initiative, which held our first, which actually was your creation on behalf of the public, to create a service organization that would serve the public in improving the lives of the citizens of Margaret. And I just wanted to share with you that we held a meeting on Tuesday, our first, and we established our bylaws. We voted for our bylaws, we voted to open a bank account, and we voted to apply for 509A status, which is a charitable status that allows to collect money, charitable contributions on behalf of the citizens of Margaret. It's not for public good. So, and just the founding board members and I are really honored to be asked to serve this purpose on your behalf, and we'll do our best to stay in step with you and the open space initiatives and the green initiatives that are important to the residents of Margaret and the council. What else do I want to say? You did a great job in selecting the initial group. As we went around the table and introduced ourselves to one another, I was really kind of impressed with how diverse and qualified each person was and bringing different skills to the organization. So we look forward to working with you in the future. And great to be here with you all again. I haven't been in this room since December 2022, so I miss you too.
May I ask a question? Can I just ask you to explain for those who may be listening what the general goals of this group are?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I could do it extemporaneously, but it's better just to read the purpose.
Okay.
Because it's lengthy, okay? So the organizational purpose of the Friends of Narberth Green Initiative is to improve the lives of citizens, businesses, and visitors of Narberth Borough by preserving, stewarding, maintaining, and revitalizing green open spaces throughout the borough, promoting and supporting green energy households, supporting the acquisition, development, and maintenance of new green open spaces within the borough, fostering healthy public space and work projects within the borough, engaging diverse communities, promoting community economic development, and performing related municipal purposes that advance or support open space and green energy initiatives within the borough of Margaret.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you, and thanks again for your service on the Quanti Board, as well as your prior work here in council. All right, that's it for folks in this room. Anyone online has public comment?
Is there any public comment online?
Please either raise your hand or otherwise display that you wish to make a comment.
I think we need to mute all participants. That's why Lawrence has said that, because he's not muted. And highlight us for no refer. There we go. And then we should do that.
All right, it doesn't look like there's any public comment online. So we'll close public comment and we'll move on to our presentation and discussion items. Starting with the draft parking regulations. Barbara.
Sure. All of you here at the table know we've been talking about this for quite a while. So I just want to let everyone know how we got to this place, that we have draft resolution and ordinance to adopt changes to parking in the borough. In December 2017, Nelson Nygaard published the parking study that council had asked them to do. And that study identified areas of concern. It was based on emails they received from residents, a survey that they did of residents, and then their own observations. And they made a number of recommendations around how you could handle some of these areas of concern, but they gave you options. So, you know, here's an area of concern, and here's 3 different ways you might want to address that. They didn't say, and this is the one that we think's best. So they very much left it up to us to go through and think, well, what did we want to do? In May of 2019, the borough manager, working with that report, proposed some changes to the parking permit program. And at that time, council chose only to adopt regulations that codified the guest pass parking program. The program was already in place, it was in existence, but it was never codified. So, you know, it was a nicety, but you needed to have it in the code. So it was codified, but at that time they decided, and they just decided we're not ready to take action on these other things. And you know, I think there probably was an intention that at some point in 2019 that would get picked up again. That didn't happen. You get to 2020, you all know what happened in 2020. I don't think parking was top of mind for anybody at that point. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that is when the borough stopped requiring renewal of existing parking permits. I couldn't find exactly when, but I think that's when it happened. It would make sense to me that that's when it would have happened. And so that's been continued ever since then. If somebody had a parking permit, they don't have to renew it. If you move to a new 2-hour zone and need a permit, you do have to apply for one and pay the $5, but.
Or if you get a new vehicle, registration.
If you come in, yeah, well, yes, because you need a sticker, because they don't transfer, that's true. In December 2020, council appointed folks to the parking study task force. They were residents of the borough, including Jean, and they were assisted by the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Their report was issued in September of 2021. They worked with the Nelson Nygaard report and in many instances shared the same concerns that Nelson Nygaard had. Again, though there wasn't a direct, here, do this for this and this for this and this for this. So in October 2021, council established the ad hoc parking committee. And the committee started working through not only issues with permit parking, but when we started looking at the parking chapter, we realized there were a lot of sections in there that were out of date or incorrect. Some things were just not allowing us to effectively administer our rules. And so the committee was keeping all of those things going. And you may remember we had an ordinance in, I think it was June of last year, that addressed a lot of the cleanup things. Last August, the committee's recommendations for changes to the parking permit program were presented to council. Council was in agreement with the committee generally on the changes that we were recommending to address some of the concerns that had been identified. through various means in the past, but wanted us to take another look at the fees and enforcement hours that we were recommending. So we did that in November 2022. We came back and and at that meeting, council selected the permit fees that you'll see in the resolution that we have now. We all agreed that we wanted to develop enforcement periods that would replicate as closely as possible what we have right now, but standardizing them because there's just so many enforcement periods right now throughout the borough. But before we could do that, we really needed to know what we have throughout the borough because our code has not been kept up to date. Every time a new 2-hour zone was added, it was not reflected in the code. So Public Works had to do an on-street inventory of the signs, which took a while, but they got it done. I really appreciate their help. And in April 2023, we proposed a map that showed the new enforcement hours again to council. Again, it's what's in the package, and council agreed with those enforcement hours at that time. So what you have in this ordinance and resolution is really bringing together all of the decisions council has already made. It's just now getting them into the language in which we could actually adopt them, as opposed to, as you see in the packet, there's kind of a plain language description of the changes. We need to have something that, can be enacted. I want to thank the fellow committee members, Bob Weisbord, Rob McGreevy, also Samantha Bryant and Michelle Carroll. I mean, we all took a year-long plus dive into parking, and I really appreciate their willingness to be so involved in this. It's way more detailed than anyone would ever expect. And I also want to thank our Public Works Department and Solicitor Walco for their assistance in getting us to where we are tonight. So really, we're where we had wanted to get when we started this process in October 2021. So the draft resolution and ordinance in the packet, as I said, is just codifying the decisions council has made so far. I mean, and then also cleaning up something, continuing to clean up things that were in the chapter that there was a lot of excess verbiage about parking meters that didn't need to be in there. Plus, they didn't talk about Park Mobile, because why would they? That just came about in 2022. So things like that needed to be changed. So the packet also contains, if anyone hasn't looked at it, general observations from the committee. So you can see things that we took into consideration, a lot of the concerns that we were trying to address. As I mentioned, a plain language description of the proposed changes so that you can see that. And a map of the neighborhoods that we're proposing for the borough. What I want to remind everyone is that the permit parking changes are just that. They're changes to the existing program. This program has been in place for I don't know how long, very long time. And these are just changes to address some concerns that residents had had. It doesn't create any new 2-hour areas. We're not suggesting that, but there is a process that is included in there that would allow residents to request a new 2-hour area, so that council can then look at see, does this meet the criteria that we've set? Should we add a new 2-hour area? We're not expecting council to take any action on this tonight. This is to get it to council so you can now see it in ordinance form. I don't know about you, but that always helps me to look at that, even if I think I know what I wanted the ordinance to say. When I see it in words, it's like, oh, maybe that's, maybe it needs a little tweaking. So I wanted everyone to have time to really look at it. I want the public to have time to look at it and see, do they have concerns? Depending on where everyone is, this may come before council for a vote to advertise at our business meeting in October, but our hope is that we can have this enacted before the end of the year if council is agreeable to that. So anyway, I could go over briefly what the changes are if people feel that would be useful. I'm happy to do that.
Anybody have questions at this point?
I do have one, just clarifying question. Why the central 8 to 8 Monday through Saturday? I guess I can appreciate the direct 5A business zone, but why, for example, would Williams Ave or Meeting House or Hampton or Grayling need additional hours and days?
That was a recommendation based on how parking was getting smooshed, how the time was getting, parking gets, when people can't find the parking they want in one area, they move into others, and so the feeling was those were business district adjacent enough that they would need that extra protection. It's giving extra protection to the people who live there.
Okay, or adding the onus of responsibility when they have, let's say, a party on Saturday to call and register all of their family.
They don't have to
cars.
call, you can go online to
Well,
register.
or go online,
But-
for example.
Yes,
Just
but
have people show up at 7.
if they show up at 7, there's no reason to, if they show up at 6, if your
Okay.
party starts at 6 or later, there's no reason to register because it's only, by 8 o'clock?
No, I'm just saying, as someone who lives in that area, I've never seen a problem on a Saturday or after 6, so I'm curious what we're responding to. And suspect that if we truly are gonna enforce that we will see feedback. And has there been a problem with people in Williams, let's say, or Hampton or Iona complaining about that? Again, that makes sense in the 5A district, but not that far.
Yeah, well, see, but we also want to pick up the Iona down, closer to Montgomery Avenue. We want to pick up the Montgomery Avenue Business District, and to create pockets really causes a problem. So like if you did a little pocket of the Montgomery Avenue Business District and then had an in-between that something that you called north, it's like really, it's going to be really confusing for people.
Okay, that would be, I would ask residents in that area to probably offer feedback, or maybe intentionally ask residents. I mean, there's one business that is an absolute issue in monopolizing space.
Well, but I think even if that's going to be addressed in some ways, they're not going to be allowed to get residential permits anymore. None of the businesses will be. So any businesses that had a residential sticker they're gone.
No, it's the business, it's the body shop that just builds it in.
Yeah, I
And
know.
takes the 2-hour ticket.
But there are other businesses down there that I think, can cause
Sure.
pinch points with parking. So I don't want to say it's just one.
I would just ask that we maybe put this map on social media, let folks look at it, and specifically ask, there's a Land Twin Ave group. Do you think, now they're a private street, so they're not on here?
Well, they're not to our protection.
They're not-
They're not, that's what I said, they're not on here,
It's just this, yes.
but it's adjacent to
I know,
that
but they
area.
don't have 2 hour, they don't have.
No, I understand that, but the group is like that whole corridor.
Yeah,
That Land Twin Ave group, I think we should solicit
But-
neighbors, do you
but-
want this protection
No, but-
that we're telling you?
but-
I'm sorry, if I can just finish my sentence.
Sure.
Do you want this protection we think you all need, or is this onerous on a Saturday after 6? Because you are uniquely affected by this new parking. I think folks will probably get around the 8 to 6 Monday through Friday, but I would love neighbor feedback.
But the Land Twin folks this does not apply to them.
I understand that, but that
We were using
group,
them as the example, it
No,
doesn't
no, no.
apply to them.
what I was saying was the Land Twin group has this whole adjacent area on it, the Meeting House, the Williams, the Iona, so that could be an outreach tool.
I'm not, you mean some kind of Facebook group?
Yeah,
Oh,
where we can say,
okay,
hey
that
folks,
was
you
not
should look
clear.
at this. We think we're protecting you. Do you want this protection or is this onerous?
I would also note, having had a business in that area for 13 years, that the businesses down toward that end of the borough tend to be office type of business, is less retail in that section, and they tend to be Monday through Friday businesses. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think again, if we could take this map, we can put it in that group and ask for neighbor feedback of, is this the protection that you want?
Also, having served on the task force, we did get a lot of feedback that there were some parking issues in those areas that are adjacent to the business district. So I think, I know maybe the the actual borders may be a little bit,
Yeah, might need some revision.
well, I mean, I think it makes sense the way it's mapped, but that's my thought.
Yeah, again, I think we should ask the residents who we think we're protecting. The 300 block of Iona is absolutely criminal. I mean, it's awful that we allow that to happen. And I know that we do everything. You could stand there all day, John, and probably write tickets every 2 hours and fund a position.
All right, I'd like to
Yeah.
go over the other
Yep.
changes to the,
We'll look at that, Cindy, but again, I come back to, we want to make sure we're not creating a map that is so hard for people to understand. And if we decide that we don't want, part of Iona to have the 8 to 8 p.m., it's going to be really hard to get 8 to 8 p.m. to the 300 block of Iona.
Right.
Because that's just going to be way too confusing.
Yeah, I don't know that we need it, but I think we should ask residents, is there a reason why? Do you agree that you need protection here? That's all. And if we can make that available, social media, do some outreach. But other than that, I think the day and the week pass for free, that was my really giant concern. That is now free. The reduced permit fees, I think, are reasonable. I think we have to create policies where people who rent apartments know that they're not going to park on our streets, and that does this.
probably when we go back to
Well, and that was,
your thoughts.
would people like me to go through the changes, just briefly?
I think it'd be
for us?
helpful. It's been a while
Okay.
since we've discussed this.
So, okay, all right. So these are changes in the permit parking. So this would be where there currently are 2-hour parking limitations. Those have all been put there because residents requested them. None of them were put there by the borough. They all came about through resident requests. As I noted, currently we have quite a mismatch of enforcement periods throughout the borough. It's sometimes different signs on the same block, so it can be a little dicey. So we, based on what Nelson Nygaard recommended, we came up with a map where we have 3 neighborhoods: north, central, and south. For the existing 2-hour limited areas in each of those neighborhoods, if you have a permit to park, you can park anywhere within your neighborhood under the proposed changes. Right now, you can only park on your block, which limits you quite a bit. So this gives folks a little more flexibility about where they can park. As we noted, the enforcement hours are standardized. We proposed 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday for the Central District. That's to reflect the fact that there are businesses competing with residents for parking in those areas. And that the north area and the south side neighborhoods would be 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. There's also a process that's been developed for residents to request the addition of 2-hour parking in their area, and also the removal of 2-hour parking if they decide, not sure we need this anymore. In both instances, they will need to get 60% of the residents in the affected area to sign a petition saying they are wanting to do that. And then there's some other criteria for that. If you want to add, the parking utilization during peak hours has to be greater than 60%. We're not going to add it if it's not warranted from that standpoint. In all these cases, it's really up to council to consider the request. It's not saying, oh, if you meet these criteria, you're definitely getting one way or the other. It's really going to be council then considering it and making a decision. The annual fees for permits would be, for a residential permit, would be $10 for the first car, $20 for the second, $50 for the third, and $100 for the fourth. We propose that graduated step to really reflect the fact that, you've got 4 cars, you're using a lot of space on the street, so you should be paying a little bit more for that. The fees are are being increased from what is currently $5 a year, because the fees are not covering the cost to administer and enforce the program. We want to increase that. So that's what that's about. There are guest passes, and as Cindy noted, there's no fee for the daily or the weekly pass. There is, though, the ability to purchase a hang tag for $75 that you could use for a whole year, and you can transfer it from car to car, but you can only buy one per household. So that could come in handy, I'm sure, for somebody who has someone regularly coming to their house. When this program goes into effect, it's going to be administered using license plate readers instead of stickers, so that'll all go away, and it'll be a little more efficient and also generate less papery stuff. There are a few other street parking proposed changes to highlight. There's some increases and some fines. The parking on a snow emergency route, damaging the parking meters and things that came about, recommendations from staff. And then we're also clarifying and kind of relaxing the time limit for EV chargers. Right now, you just can't park there unless it's an EV car, but this is going to be changed and say, between the hours of 8 and 5, 7 days a week, only EV cars can park there when they're charging, but any of the other times, so from 5 p.m. to 8 in the morning, any car can park there, whether they're charging or not, whether they're an EV car or not. Those are kind of the main highlights of what you're going to see in here. Does anybody have any questions on this? Sure.
For visitor parking, has it been made clear that you can only get a visitor's pass if you live on the block where you're requesting a free pass?
When you make the request,
Yes.
you, the resident, have to make the request on behalf of your guest. You're going to have to provide your address.
Okay,
If your address is not in a 2 hours
right.
permitted area, you're not going to get a guest pass.
Okay, so if you don't live on the block, you can't request a guest pass
For that block, no. You need to find them, if there's somebody who wants.
And I think that was not necessarily clear before
Well-
and became an issue.
That, it could be. I mean, people are, as we know, people will, if they think there's a way to game the system, somebody might. There's always that
You
chance.
just want to make it clear.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, I mean, that is how it's written. Good, so.
And the implementation date, is there?
Well, that's
To be
gonna be,
determined.
yes, to be determined, yeah.
But next year.
That's the hope. Yep. That's the intention, I guess I should say.
So we'll be discussing with the office when
Yeah.
when a reasonable
Yeah.
implementation date
Right.
will be.
Right.
Before you want to do an implementation date, you want to do some sort of period of education.
For sure. I mean, there'll need to be
Yes.
a lot of outreach. And in fact, before we put this up for a vote, I think we're gonna need to remind the community what's in here and what's coming down, and give them an opportunity to, speak up.
Yeah.
If they have concerns.
Yeah.
So this needs to be, once council is finished tonight, and I'm assuming, whatever changes we make, I haven't heard any yet, but, otherwise, the draft should be posted on the website, and we should, announce it through the newsletter, through Facebook, that this is gonna be coming up for a vote.
I have a few.
Yeah, we're also gonna
cleanup.
we're gonna have to purchase signage for the
Right.
new districts. Public Works actually practically went around and estimated how many signs we're gonna need and what it's gonna cost. And it came in at about $12,000 for everything, so,
Well, 13,004 if you add in the 10%.
yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, where are they thinking of putting signs? On all the 2-hour streets?
Well, we now have neighborhoods, we didn't have these neighborhood zones, so we're gonna have to identify, like, this is zone 1 or north, central, south, like.
But it's only the streets that are current that have the 2 hour that you need to identify, because anybody can park on the other ones.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
Well, and I guess I would
you
question
can put a
whether,
big old
I think what it
sticker
is
on,
they
you can
wanted
put a
to
big
do-
old number sticker on the 2-hour parking signs. Maybe.
Is they wanted to put on each of the signs not only the zone, put the time period on there.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's why they needed to
Oh,
order.
well, yeah, we need to clarify the times, so.
So
that makes sense.
that's the reason why they need to order them. They also kind of wanted to do a little larger sign, so they didn't have to do multiple signs down the block.
Right.
And they could
Okay.
just say, this is the parking regulation corner.
That's a good idea.
So they aren't trying to, add more signs than are needed, but.
I just wanted to say there are some, before we post anything on the website, there are a few cleanup things that John Walco and I noticed that before this got to, that we noticed after this was put in the packet. So I'll get those things taken care of, and then I'll let the office know when it can be posted. For, in a more pushing it out at people way. But that should be in a couple days. So.
And then really just, we just need to come up with a key summary of all the,
I already have
significant
that.
changes.
I already have that.
We'll just kind of put it out there
It's
for
in the
them and.
packet. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's in the packet right now, so, yeah. There is one thing that I wanted to bring to council if does anybody have anything else? No? Okay, so in the resolution, and this was Solicitor Walco's idea initially, but I changed it quite a bit, so in the ordinance, we list the holidays during which you don't have to feed the meters, so it's the typical ones. But he recommended that in the resolution, we have something in there if there are events during which we don't enforce parking meters, and so he was like listing, the Dickens Fest and that kind of stuff, and I thought, well, I hate to specifically list, because, that could change, and sometimes they're on Sunday, so it doesn't apply anyway, and, whatever. So I changed it to say that in addition to the holidays established in the chapter of the code, no payments are required for parking meters when some or all of the metered streets are closed for street festivals. Does that sound like that would capture everything to everybody?
How about just throwing in an officially recognized, event of Borough?
Well, but they're not, this is the thing, those are not borough-sponsored events, they are.
True, but we recognize them as community events, and we could just say that these events, during these events, certain parking restrictions are lifted.
Defer to Andrea and the
Yeah.
chief string here. Is that, do we typically turn on, not enforce the other meters?
A lot of the events take place on Sundays.
Yeah.
So it's irrelevant.
The Music Fest, though, is on Saturdays, right?
No.
No, all right, so I'm getting confused, that's Dickens. that's on
But there
Saturday.
are scavenger hunts for the kids and stuff like that on Saturdays. There's a couple different things.
I just wondered what this all last year just happened.
I don't know that you want to be official on that, because I don't know that you want to make an official announcement, because sometimes you need people to move their cars during,
True.
for things.
Yeah. So are we aware of any festivals during which we don't enforce the meters?
Not really.
Okay, well then in that case, we don't need this.
Yeah,
As I
I
said,
just crossed that out.
as I said, Solicitor Walco added it because he thought we should probably consider it.
I think
because he
leave the
thought-
option in, and then if we can always say no parking or something if we don't want people parking there. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I know, I was gonna say, it's kind of like, well, if you're saying we don't ever do it, then I don't know that I'd leave the
Yeah.
option in there, because
Yeah.
it's too, you wouldn't know what it applies to.
Even if it's not in there, we'd have the discretion to say parking holiday or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Based on this event, we're not going to enforce meter parking on this day.
Yeah, we always have that discretion.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
I will get back to John and make sure that that we've got the discretion in here.
Sure.
But that we don't want to try to itemize what it's for.
Just give us general discretion.
Yeah, exactly. Not specific, how do we do that, John? This is where it's really helpful to have somebody who writes a lot of legal stuff.
We could just pass a resolution on the events that we recognize will invoke parking holiday,
We could just say that we have the right to announce it.
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah, we could, but it's, yeah. All right, anything else? Okay, all right. Well, I will work on, as I said, there's a few just kind of almost like housekeeping things that John and I need to do. So we'll do that, and when that's ready, we'll get that posted on the website. Maybe there'll be maybe we could do a special flash about it? I don't know.
Yeah, and then I think based on feedback, we can I'll think about whether we want to have this October's or November's.
Right, exactly.
Because if we announce this, then we can
Yeah,
discuss again at November workshop if the public is
right, exactly.
particularly concerned, and then
Yeah,
vote in November
yeah.
business.
Yeah, I agree, that makes sense. And if anybody has, continues to look at the drafts and notices something, especially if you see typos or something that isn't clear, please let me know. We want to get those things fixed so that.
I just wanted to thank you and the committee for working on this, because I know it's such a complex and not fun thing to work through.
Well, you heard how long it's been going on.
And I
before I was
really
on
appreciate
council.
all the hours, countless hours that you guys have put into this. And I also thank you for allowing me to walk through the ordinance with you to clarify any questions. And it was clear that every decision was deliberated and thought through, and so I just want to appreciate it.
Thank you, Jean. I appreciate that, and as I said, it was a team effort. I really appreciate all the work that Rob and Bob did, and Samantha, Michelle, the chief, Public Works. I mean, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for them, so thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Our next presentation item, introductory presentation for the draft proposed 2024 budget. Mr. Borough Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President, Council. Actually, I have a narrative document that I'm just going to go through. But included in your packet, 2 documents. One being, back up there. 3 documents. One being a simple summary based on different expense and revenue categories of the budget. The second document being the line item version of, and again, I should clarify, this is just the general fund right now. There are still a few projects that I'm still trying to finalize and line up and figure some of those figures out. I'm very close to getting that part of the budget done. So unfortunately, I don't have that here for you this evening. Just a second here. So I just like to quick start by kind of providing a little bit of an explanation about my comments regarding miscoding. I want to be clear that when I say miscoding, I am not implying misappropriation or unaccounted for funds or anything nefarious at any level. What I'm referring to is something that's really comes down to how we track different revenues and expenses. And what happens in a miscoding incident is that somebody well-intended who understands some level of the budget will code something to an area they think logically fits what that expense is, but it in fact isn't where we were tracking another overall expense. It doesn't mean that we violated our budgets. It doesn't mean that we didn't follow procedure, but what it does make is it a little bit more difficult to make quick, well, not quick, but a lot easier cost estimates based off of that activity. So just want to be clear on that, and it is not unusual, by the way, to have miscoding issues, especially when there are issues where you have a lot of management transition and the people who were responsible for that budget moved on and somebody else comes in and I was unfamiliar with the coding setup, these things happen. They can be sorted, and certainly we are getting a lot closer to figuring out the details of where a lot of things are and putting together the picture. Tonight I present to you a very, very rough draft proposal, and I want to be clear, this is not a document the Borough Council has approved or taken action on in any way. This is simply what I'd like to offer as a starting point with some of the estimates and some of the things that we're looking at in terms of sort of our budget trajectory for next year. Included in this budget, I'll start with the revenues. Right now, I did not make any adjustments to the proposed levy for 2024. In fact, it was adjusted to try to make no difference in terms of tax rate. At some point, we will have some later discussions about property taxes and possible implications if we were to consider increases. I don't have any of that discussion material available today, and given since the budget doesn't give us a full picture, it would make sense to wait for that discussion. We're also waiting to learn a little bit more about basically the outcome of our earned income tax program and kind of the patterns of revenue that we will be able to more consistently predict. And once we have that information, we should be able to finalize that. Right now, I just made a small adjustment to the original estimate that Samantha had offered for last year's budget, not exactly knowing what we could predict in terms of any changes going into next year. I am following up with Berkheimer, to try to get a clear picture of that. Once that information is available, we'll update that for the next version of the budget. Moving on to the next item, fees and penalties. There were a few changes that I made in this document since it first went out, and so I just want to point some of those out. There was a very large figure for street opening permits that was reduced back down to 5,000. We also had kind of a relatively low figure in terms of parking meter revenue. I since adjusted that to 60,000. It probably could be 70,000, so later I might just adjust it back up to that level. I think that's kind of where we're going to end this year in terms of metered revenues. In terms of interest earnings, we've never really had a very large yield there. There is an opportunity for us to look at low risk investments that allow us to still maintain a reasonable level of liquidity and access to funds when needed, but when those funds are inactive, they can at least bring in a little bit more interest than what we're currently getting with some of the savings accounts we have, which are at very low interest rate levels. So that's something that we can look into next year to hopefully help improve that a little bit. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it's always nice to get, $5,000–6,000 a year in interest. And that's money we can get off of funds that we're just not making use of right now. So it's very practical to look into.
So Ken, just if I can briefly interrupt, what you're talking about right now on all these revenues is if we kept our current level of taxation and our current fee structure and our current, if we kept everything kind of as is, this is what we would project to bring in next year.
Well, technically, for the most part, minus a few adjustments, this would probably be what we would project for next year minus what we do anything for property tax.
Thanks. Just wanted to.
And that is the reason why the document presented to you has more expense over revenues, because there hasn't been any adjustments to the revenue side to offset that. But we'll get into that in a little bit later in my presentation. There are not too many other lines in the income side of the general fund budget of note at this point, other than that I did not include a transfer as we traditionally do to capital, given the fact that we had a budget shortfall. Or not a shortfall, but a difference in revenue and expenses if you, for the time being, at least based on this draft.
Fred, is it okay to ask clarifying questions or should we hold?
Of course, you can stop me whenever you're ready.
Well, tell you what, why don't you go through the rest of the income and revenue, and we'll pause there and we'll ask questions on that.
Right now, estimated revenue based off of this version of budget, $5,163,000 approximately. Moving on to expense.
Well, I thought maybe we could pause here for questions
okay.
on the
Yes.
income,
Yeah.
on this
So-
section.
So my question is, if the rent for the first half of the year is 211,000, how are we predicting, why is that number low? We're not collected rents or something and they're due later, or?
You're talking about the Sabine,
Well, I'm talking about
the
this
revenue
payment.
201
Are you
Sabine.
talking about the mid-year figure?
Yeah,
It could just been timing of when we received the money.
okay.
The reason why I include the mid-year figure in there is because it can often be a useful tool for,
Right.
the kind of consistent expenditures or revenues we have for the year. Not so much with other things that are less predictable in terms of timing.
Yeah, I was just multiplying by 2 and coming out short. That's
I mean, it's fully rented and the rates go up, not down over time.
Okay,
So
so
I would expect it to be comparable to last
Okay.
year.
I think we get rent settlements on a quarterly basis.
Yes.
So that's
So we
part of
missed
the
a
reason
quarter,
why
okay, yeah,
you're not
okay.
seeing it all.
Okay, fine. Got it.
I mean, you can address it again.
Can you speak to the reimbursements and miscellaneous?
Mm-hmm.
Why does that go up almost 2,000% next year?
Where are
It's the second to last line.
Second to last.
we? Retiree healthcare reimbursement? No, which,
It's second to
It
last.
says reimbursements and miscellaneous.
I was not looking at revenue, I don't know.
Reimbursements. and-
Why is it so low this year?
We go from 2,500 to 51,000, up 2,000%. What
What
happened?
is the line item number next to it? There's a,
I don't know, it's in front of you.
oh, it's on this document. I'm sorry.
It's the second to last line.
But it's
Okay.
been higher in the past.
I don't know why they did 2,500, because look at our yield to date, what it is currently, it's 38,000.
Budget
Yeah.
number, the 2,500, so
Which one?
it's,
That's here.
maybe it may have been
So,
just
like,
estimated very
budgeted
low
that,
to be
but
conservative.
Mid-year was at that.
Remote documents.
It's in revenue.
It's on
Yes.
So that's kind of, I mean,
Not really quite sure why the prior year number there. It could actually be a different figure. It could be an error in my spreadsheet.
Yeah.
In which
so-
case,
Okay. Revenue.
please ignore.
Okay, what falls under reimbursements and miscellaneous?
basically anything that doesn't have the code in the revenues for administrative, so we charge reimbursements for things that people paid for and we have to reimburse them, it goes to that line item.
No, but this is revenue.
It's listed, so I think what's
Or-
going on is it's
Yeah.
it's
So-
miscellaneous revenue. In the past, we've gotten a lot of miscellaneous revenue. It's not usually budgeted that we're gonna get a lot of miscellaneous revenue, so I think that more reflects.
My plan is to fix that. I think we need a few more categories to break down that miscellaneous revenue category a little bit, because I know there are some things that are regularly landing in there that probably could just have its own line. The miscellaneous line is really for that unexpected expenditure that we know we need to process, but we don't really have a consistent place for it.
But it sounds like we don't think we're gonna get $51,000 of miscellaneous revenue
Well, we already have
next year.
38.
Well, we have 25.
I honestly,
Oh, year to date.
I did not have the opportunity
Okay.
to go through that line item
Okay.
transactions. So the number that's in there, I believe, is
Yeah, okay.
the 49.2 or.
Yeah.
That figure is based off of an average of historical activity. It's really not, it doesn't have any other basis but that.
Well, it might be better to use 2023's budget
It's
number of
random.
2,500 if
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah, it's hard to predict.
unpredictable. I guess that's why Samantha used the 2,500 was because
Correct.
it does fluctuate all over the place.
Right, so
Well,
better to assume low.
Yeah, exactly. That-
And then
Consistently, it has
surprised.
been far over 2,500.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be probably too low. But again, I'm not gonna criticize anybody for taking caution on revenue that we have no reasonable predictive capacity.
Right, yeah, so.
Yeah, then it becomes found money.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Well, it's not found money. I honestly believe that we could create more better categories to include some of those things. I was looking for a refund and reimbursement expense category for, I don't remember what it was, a permit or whatever that we had done. And I couldn't find that. And I think that's just a very useful line to have because you're only going to use it for that circumstance and then you can see that activity. It's very clean and easy to track. Aside from, usually the miscellaneous category usually covers the refunds. It will cover, as I've placed here, sale of fixed assets, why I have 1,200 in there. I honestly don't know where that number came from at this point. I don't see it in my notes. But that would be anytime we sell any surplus property, that's where the revenue would be booked and entered. And there is some plans to make sale of some surplus property, so we may make some adjustments to that a little later. The other part, although it doesn't appear to have the label, is transfers in from other funds. The label is missing on top of that category in the line item document.
Transfers.
I'm sorry, what is it?
So I think we're
The two different
confused maybe
documents.
about
Yeah,
which
where we
document
are.
you're in, Ken, if you
Yeah,
could point
I'm
us.
sorry. I am in,
Because it's not, I don't think it's what's up on the screen
no,
right
so
now.
that's the summary document. And you could look at that, but you wouldn't see the line item.
Right, so it's very confusing.
It's the one with the longer lines. Yeah, it's this one, yes.
Yeah, see if that one.
Okay, wait, that's a separate document, that's gotta be a separate document.
It is, we'll put it on screen.
That's a different.
So that breaks out all of the categories for the revenue and expenditures.
So there's no real planned transfers in. There's this 4,500 that was last year budgeted for a transfer out of solid waste, but I don't know if that's a continuing revenue, and if not, I'm just going to have that zeroed out.
There.
Any other questions on revenue?
Well, I think people are just looking at the document, the more detailed document right now.
You were, yeah.
We'll give it a second.
So, did you say there was something that doesn't have a label on it? I'm not.
It's just the last group is all transfers.
Yeah,
They just don't have, they're not
The
labeled
label
transfers.
dropped off
Oh,
there
yeah.
somehow.
well, they're XFER from sewer fund.
Well, each individual item, there's no, the category doesn't have a label. but it's
Oh,
fine.
up here? Oh, well,
Yeah.
I can tell that's
They're
transfers. I'm sorry, I wasn't
You
even
got it.
seeing the main category, so yeah,
You got
that's okay, we're good, all right.
I just had a question about the highway fund. I didn't
Yes.
see it as a line item in here.
The highway fund is actually its own individual fund. It's
So it's not counted.
Fund 35, and it would be treated, it's akin to a capital fund. So it will be presented to you with the capital budget, along with the Green Initiative Fund that you guys have created. That one's also gonna be treated capital-like, but we will be keeping those funds separate. Any other questions on the revenue side? Moving on to general fund expenses. One of the updates that occurred here before the meeting was a correction to the estimates, or rather the figures that were inputted for health insurance. Health insurance line items in any of the budgets that host staffing include the health insurance premiums, the HRA account contributions, and dental. So it's not going to exactly round out to the borough's share of the cost, which is 95%. The employees pay 5% towards that of the insurance costs. But I put in 9% right now. That is not at all the number that I can say with confidence that we're actually going to have. But we are close to getting finalized quotes. If not, we already have some for health insurance. So we'll be looking at that, and adjustments are going to be made accordingly to that. So moving into the first.
Ken, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
before you move ahead, can I ask the bill back to revenue, the building permit fees, that 168.6 number for 2024, is that estimate from 230 Haverford, 650 Montgomery, Price? When were those permits?
You mean
Elmwood.
the increase that I had?
Yeah.
That's just was based off of the building permit activity and some of the averages. I talked with Kevin Walsh a little bit, and that's where I kind of came up with that figure. It certainly can be lowered. It is a little bit on the high side, and there's no harm in lowering it, because if it's higher, you know,
Yeah, the
it's
650
there.
paid.
I don't think they submit those fees until we approve the plan. Like, I think we're likely to
So
get
actually,
fees for 230 Haverford if that project goes forward. I think we're likely to get it next year. Like,
Okay, so that's probably
Am
our
I-
only one, because everything else is.
Well, maybe I'm wrong.
fees are paid for upfront before a permit is obtained.
But after a plan is approved, right?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
yes and no. You have to pay for your building permit upfront based off of the borough's square footage fees that we've adopted, plus there's plan review expenses that need to be paid for upfront. The meeting review process, if there is any fees, that would be paid for upfront. So most of the fees are paid for upfront.
Okay.
Before the process initiates.
The council did pass a resolution this past year for large projects where they're not billed a straight 3% on cost of construction. It's based on the fees of, the building inspector, the engineer. It's more like an escrow. So it's.
So that'll reduce. Okay.
Yeah. Because if it was 3% on every project, then 230 Haverford, imagine what that building permit fee would be.
Right, okay, I was just
Yeah.
thinking of what's in that 2024 estimate, and it's really just 230 and potentially Elmwood.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
building permit fees, we've received numerous building permit fees, not just for new construction, but renovations and other
Right.
activities in the borough.
Substantial. Yeah,
So actually a bulk of that will come from other activity outside of what's happening downtown, so.
thank you.
It's been high for the last, 5 or 6 years. It's been over 130, 140, so.
As I just remember Samantha saying, thank the elm.
Yeah.
Thank
You
the
know,
new buildings, because that really infused
Mm.
significant funds, and I just wanted to, okay, thank you.
But that's not where the.
Well, I mean, we're at 128 at mid-year.
Yeah.
So
Additionally, but we did
that's
that
why I
one-time
thought
infusion.
that 160
Yes.
wasn't far off. And if you look back to what is supposed to be the 2022 actuals, the two dropped off of there, I'm sorry. But that last column before the description, after the description to the right, that's the actuals from 2022. And you can see, 154,000 back in 22. So I think our normal range without pandemic is probably somewhere in this 150, 160 some range.
That was the elm in 2020.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, let's come back to our.
yep, sorry.
No
Back
problem.
to,
That's a good question.
I think you were on personnel expenses.
Yeah.
Healthcare.
So included in here, I just built into the wages 2% COLA. We obviously haven't had a discussion about where to set COLA. I also haven't done a full amount of research on that. So there may be some adjustments on that and some discussion on that to come. More significant discussion on that. Looking for highlights for the finance and administration section. One, I wanted to break out elements that were in the administration department that weren't really part of our operation, because I thought it made it harder for me to track the department's activity and its financial progress, through the budget with having those other elements in there. So I broke some things out of there that includes building and planning that became a separate department in terms of budget. And so that's laid out in another section. But looking at the section right now, and it is quite a variation from prior year, we're looking at 114,000 right now, just in this version, higher from 2023. The bulk of that increase obviously comes from a staffing change that we talked about for the bookkeeper. That is a significant contributor. Another would be the health insurance costs, and some others would be some of the expenses related to the software subscription line. And I think there's some options for us to kind of work some of these figures down. I do know that we don't yet have the full picture of the health insurance picture, what we're going to need for our new hires. Once we have that, there'll be some adjusted figures to go in there, not to mention once we find out what we can expect for premium costs, that number will probably adjust. So there is quite a bit in here that will change, and some of these numbers are certainly nowhere near complete. You'll see the stuff that's highlighted in yellow. I did that simply in case some of you had looked at the previous version of this document. These were changed up to the meeting, and that's the reason why there are yellow highlights on there. Moving on to the next section, if anybody's okay with that. Here we have planning and building. It's now broken out into its own section. In there, I still don't have an exacting figure of what we can expect for increase for some of our contracted services in this area. So this will be a number that may or may not change. We have seen an increase in the enforcement costs since we took on the sidewalk inspection program. However, I am starting to think that we're probably getting close to the end of that and we'll be mostly caught up. And so maybe that figure might get to go down too. Because a lot of what we're finding in terms of sidewalk inspections is a lot of it is already been finished now. So a lot of what was on our list doesn't need to be addressed anymore. So that may be another option that comes down. I broke out below that another department. I don't know if you want me to put this back into administration, I certainly can. But this department was just kind of where I was breaking out where we did community development and different engagement stuff. I just thought it might live a little bit better on its own rather than packaged in with administration and other things. In there, we have the same amount of funds that, so I know there's an Arbor Business Association, but there is another line item that actually we've used for contributing to that. That's further down. So this is just some 38,000 here was something that we had spoken about in finance and administration regarding doing some sort of activities to promote downtown.
Can I would just suggest we put that all into the NBA because that goes to the NBA and then we kind of earmark, we have that earmarked for certain, and F and A,
Okay,
yeah.
so we would be increasing that?
That was the discussion that we started to have in
Okay.
F and A for the public arts,
Yeah,
to adding a pilot, 10,000
Okay,
to go towards that. So yeah, and we had historically given them 25,000. So this would be an increase again to the NBA.
so here, and I skipped ahead a little bit just because of this discussion. I'm now on page 7, and on page 7 here is Park, Recreation, and Culture.
Yeah.
In here is the line item that we have been traditionally using for that purpose.
Recreation and special events. I think
Yes.
that's where the NBA was, under Samantha is.
Oh, okay.
Asian culture.
I think you're smart to separate it out to the NBA.
Okay.
Because that's where it goes. And so, for example, NAA events are very different than the
Yes.
NBA events.
Mhm.
I would be delineating
Okay.
those two. Yeah.
So perhaps put the,
So we're keeping this grouped line item.
maybe put the NBA under the Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Does that make sense?
I
Yeah.
think Cindy was saying not to.
Well, give it its own item. and
Well, yeah,
with
if
the
it
others
has its
there.
own line item, that's true. It's,
All right, I think we're not querying the amount, just sort of the location and the.
Yeah, I just would move it from economic development to squarely NBA.
well, where are you
That's all.
seeing squarely NBA?
Go back up, it's we're on page
It's a
like 4.
line.
So the number
Paragraph 5.
that I've incorporated
Page
in this
Mhm.
document is a historic number that we used to use, probably for that purpose, but it was retired. at some
Yeah.
point.
I don't think that's.
I would keep that. I think the heading of community development engagement makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
And again, I would just say I would add that 38,000 squarely to the NBA because we don't. That's
Okay.
where the
I mean, instead of saying economic
Economic,
development
correct.
program, say Norwood Business Association
Whatever.
collaboration or something. Support.
whatever, in their NBA,
Yes.
and then we
And-
have that earmarked in
Right.
that kind of MOU.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's all. I think that's a good heading, community
Gotcha.
development
Yes.
engagement, and it's very different than Parks and Rec.
All right, I'll
I
just
agree.
move it to that
Yep.
other line item.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say coordination with NCA because it's not coordinating with the Narberth Civic Association. We don't, that's a different
Right.
organization from the Narberth Business Association.
Yes.
Your comment.
No, I'm not gonna use that line.
Oh,
No,
that's-
it
So
should be
there's
NBA.
actually other line items
Right, I
hidden
see it
there.
right below it, but I'm like, don't copy the.
Fred's
comment.
seen them because he had an opportunity to help review stuff for me, but there are other line items there that have been hidden just because there's been no activity in them.
Sure,
Okay,
yeah.
so we'll
yeah.
sort that out.
We'll make sure it's the business association.
That's,
For sure. All right, just gonna take a step back to that section again where we left off, which basically goes into the police department. And in this case, the one significant structural change is that we just kind of broke out a sub-department for parking enforcement. It's still part of the police department. It's just, we thought it might be helpful to you to see us break out that, the clear attributable expenses. There's obviously other expenses the department will absorb with relation to administering, and managing the work of the parking controller, but that has been broken out, and you'll see that actually on page 5. Obviously, there's no history in there. I can probably pull some history to kind of see the historical activity, but that would take a little bit of time. But the idea here would be over time we could track it and see what that looks like. If that's something you're not interested in, we can obviously roll that right back into the police department budget, but just, an option for you to see that.
I would argue that that's necessary because one of the things that the parking committee recommended is that as we get better data on what it costs to enforce our parking rules, and as we have the parking permits started up again, as we are, and get data from that, as we have better data from parking meters, we can really see our fees set properly. And we can't see that if we don't really know what our costs are. So I would say it makes sense to start building that separately.
Well, the rest I just hand over to the chief, because, you know, he wrote the rest of it.
And
Yeah.
John, I'm assuming these are yellow because you're gonna say, what have we historically spent on ammunition, weapons and equipment, associate dues and travel?
So there are some new lines, so above the first highlight there, pretty much all contractual things, obviously health insurance, stuff like
Right.
that. Going into that first highlight, ammunition is a new line item that we've added. I couldn't find historical data on, purchases for ammunition previously. So, but this would actually be ammunition, and we would refer to it as munitions, which would be taser cartridges. Taser requires that each officer fire cartridges every year to show proficiency. So that would allow us to purchase them under that. I think a lot of this previously was pushed over to miscellaneous
Okay,
expense.
so ammunition includes tasers?
The cartridges for them.
Yeah.
And the hope would be that with this line item that we could actually purchase less lethal shotguns. We have shotguns that currently can fire with normal shotgun shells, but we'd like to get the less lethal rounds, beanbag rounds is what they're called.
Yeah.
So that would all fall under here, but it gives us that category to kind of track all that.
And then the dues, conferences and travel?
So again, there was a training budget, but trying to break that out as far as dues and membership and conferences for attending. We just sent an officer down to a conference in Maryland, and there was hotel costs, travel costs, per diem costs that were all associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like there was no current category that would fit into. So realistically, that was taken away from, the rest of the training budget.
Right.
So this would allow us to say, if we are going to provide training, but incur an additional cost just because of where the train's located, we kind of have this breaking out in there.
So my only comment here, and this is probably one for public health and safety that I would say we've discussed, we expanded your role to chief of police and director of health and public safety. And I think that we should allocate then funds for not only you, but other officers to do non-traditional training and professional development. And that would be an increase in professional development funds. And we should talk about what those are. I mean, we had the training for the, built environment and public safety, which is not under your traditional police training budget, but one of the goals was that we're really enhancing non-traditional training and professional development, and therefore we should reevaluate that line.
Okay, so we have up the general training one, which might be on the next page.
I think it is.
Okay, so the training is broken out differently from conferences and travel.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, since I'm looking for it, I can't find it.
No, okay. I don't think we need the number now, but I think we should discuss that.
But part of that was consideration, second from the bottom. Oh, no, wait.
I'm sorry.
It's mislabeled. It's 420, association dues should be training. 420 is training there. So, and then
That's how it's listed in the accounting system, so that's not
This
right.
is like jumping
All right,
around.
that makes sense, okay, because there should be a reasonable amount for training, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
So,
And the notation says, started training.
yeah, so you can see the 4550 is what was budgeted for this year. And then looking for an increase to 7,000, with the one note would be, there's no current supervisor training module as far as, we have a new sergeant providing adequate training just so enhancing his performance in his job function. So looking at that definitely would cause an increase, but there's also room for some of the other things you mentioned.
Yeah, I think we should think about, again, in public health and safety, Rob, I would ask maybe we think about how do we then invest in the director of public health and safety.
So a couple more new line items there. If you look for a couple above where we just were, advertising, promotion, and events. Coffee with the Cop, Cones with the Cop was very successful, and then having the ability to purchase things for giveaways. We were putting in the current stickers that we purchased, and we had little magnet calendars that were coming under our printing costs, which generally is like citations and victims forms, things like that. So we have another category that allows us to purchase those things, and this way when we have Coffee with the Cop, we can, buy a couple of jugs of coffee and some, cups and stuff like that to provide to the
And
residents.
donuts, right?
You have to go there.
Just careful with the powdered ones.
Yeah, no, messes up the uniform. I'll do the waiter on for that, so you can't say it.
I have heard such good things about those programs. I mean, my neighbors, their smallest son is very interested in the police department, doing all the police things. I think you've taken him on a walk around the borough at one point.
Good.
I don't know. He's so yeah, all of these events have been. I think it's great. The outreach has been
Community outreach, in fact, there was a young man in the borough, a young boy who's enthralled with the officers, and just had a birthday party, and officer birthday party, and it's nice to have the relation with our neighbors and residents. Yeah.
Could I ask one more question? So we have a fuel line police versus electric. So theoretically, that fuel line should go down, right? We've estimated 7,000 and only 500 for vehicle electric. So I appreciate us differentiating between the two, but I wonder that 7,000 should go down pretty significantly.
We will see a decrease now, obviously, with the electric car being utilized more. So, but then we still have 3 gas cars at this point, so I don't know. And with the cost of gas, we're kind of dependent upon what long range charging us.
All right, I get it.
So there will be a decrease. I don't think it's going to be too much that we would want to change the line.
Okay, I really am curious what that electric, after we have our vehicle for a year, so we can start to look at the.
Are there any other changes to the police budget this year, John?
So if we go to that second page there, IT software, so this is going to be that RMS upgrade, so our where we keep our police reports and criminal complaints. We talked previously about the current systems at end of life and not supporting it, so the purchase there requires an ongoing maintenance, which is that one fee, and then the second fee in there would be for Power DMS, which is our system that will allow us to do policy management, allows us to do training, track officer performance, things like that in the system. So there would be the 2 new additions there. And again, a new line item just because the previous one was placed under the managed IT service fees, which is more of that Imagese, Fraser, we're calling that for technical support. This is a contracted cost for the software. Electronic equipment, again, we didn't have anything. Our radios, we don't have any portable microphones that aren't at least electrical tape or wires out, so we need to purchase them. So a request there for $2,000 to upkeep on the portable radios, and then the 6,700 there on mobile video cameras. So that's going to be our body cameras and the cameras for the cars. Currently, all our in-car cameras are inoperable and they're beyond service life. So we would look to upfit new ones, which would be included in that $6,700 cost there.
Is that IT software cost, is that one time or annual?
That would be annually.
15,000 annually? Yes. What are we paying annually right now for the?
I want to say alert was 4,000.
Okay.
Oh, we had talked about this in their committee.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the chief's clear preference.
All right.
To make the switch.
Committee recommendation is to go ahead with that?
We support that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So can we ask about the LM? So that 87,000 for this year is before the 4th of July, before the Dickens Festival. I'm assuming that price will at least double of what we spend. You're looking more at like 180-ish?
That's mid-year.
Right, well, June 30th, yeah, it doesn't include 4th of July, which I would imagine is probably our biggest ticket, and Dickens.
When Dickens comes, yeah, so 4th of July,
Yeah.
is a decent chunk.
So is that 121 realistic for proposed?
We're going to wait and see. I don't know, we haven't had talks about the MOU and what the fee is going to be for long range. So
We were also down an officer for most of the year. Plus, we had an officer who was out for an extended period of time.
Okay.
So that definitely affects like why it's
That
so
number,
high.
okay,
Yeah, so it might go up a little bit, and we can adjust that once we have talks with long range.
Okay.
So if we were down an officer, that means we have less
Right.
salary.
We're down
so
two
that
technically.
you're right, I didn't think
balances.
about it, so that maybe does cover 4th of July and Dickens, yeah.
Is that
Good point,
contract up for our service agreement with them?
So we got to find, so there was talk of them wanting to revisit the fee. So the MOU, the services stay in place, it's just the fee they're going to charge for.
Any other police questions? So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, the estimate is almost 100,000 higher, and we broke out parking controllers to a different line item, so 170 or something increase.
Oh, you know what, I'm sorry, real quick, I talked about it, and I forgot, not that make a huge difference, but under weapons and equipment 218, back on the other page, I think we have a typo there, it's 23,000, and if you look to the right, it's 3,000 and 1,000, so that should really be 4. So there's a $19,000 overage there, so we can just update that.
Okay, what's the number supposed to be, Chief?
4,000.
4,000?
Oh, 4,000.
Instead of 23.
That's been good.
Any other questions for the chief about either of his sections here?
Do you want to pause briefly and talk about our current parking controller situation, since we're on the parking controller as part of the budget?
Well, sure. I mean, it is on your agenda here later.
Okay, that's fine.
But,
I forgot that it's also.
but I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to, you know, as many of you know, Paul Freud was our parking controller. He applied for a records clerk position, and he was selected for that position, leaving us in a position where we do need to fill our parking controller role. He has been kind enough to be willing to continue to do some of that work while he's working in the office, which is good. But we'll be wanting to look, maybe that should have been on the agenda, was to get the authorization to hire, now in hindsight.
Well, we decided that it would be filling a position that's already been created.
Yeah, you're filling a position that's already in budget.
Okay,
You're
so
not changing.
we are out to advertise, and so if you know anybody who wants to be a parking controller or would be a good fit, let us know. Tell me to put in an application. So yeah, there will be some transition there, which also does mean here that in this budget, I may want to potentially predict if this individual might end up taking health insurance or something. At least the full-time position is eligible, so we'll maybe make some adjustment there depending.
He's staying with us.
It's not a complete
Look, I'm
loss.
glad
He's
he's
gonna
staying
be
with
right
us.
downstairs.
No, I know, but he's such a friendly face and a good conduit to this town.
I'm going to-
Which makes him a great person to
In the
welcome
office,
people.
I
in the office.
completely agree.
He's gonna be the friendly face in the office.
I think we
agree.
need an expense for cloning Paul Fry.
Yes, of course. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Miscellaneous medical procedures.
Yeah. Yeah, John, let's put this on John's journey.
Yeah, there you go.
So, moving into the fire, of the most significant inclusions here, really, probably the only thing of note, even though it is a reduction in funds from last year, the fire company has requested $40,000 towards their operating expenses. Prior year, last year, we included a budget with $53,574, so their request is less than what they received last year. Their other significant increases come down to wages and health insurance, and obviously those figures may be adjusted here soon, so specifically the health insurance figures, so that might end up going down. This department did not have a very significant increase in expenses. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to Public Works. There are a couple of other increases here of note. We made some adjustments to address overtime bank where Public Works Director Eldon, it should be based on some of the recent demands. We created a line item for uniforms and personal protective equipment. Previously, we didn't really have a line item for that. Traditionally, there is usually something for at least the PPE. So 5,000 was added in there for that. A lot of the other items that are wage related, those were all based off of calculations made based on that 2% COLA that we had talked about earlier. Going down, unemployment insurance and some of these other figures are probably going to get adjusted. This is highlighted because I had changed this figure to from what it was in the earlier version that was in the packet. That's why it's highlighted, but that number is likely to change once I get the unemployment insurance figures and we divvy that up based on departments. Some of the expenses, like for instance 197 here, it says Public Works Retirement. This is an expense that actually is drawn from employee deduction, and because of that it really doesn't have a place in our actual expense budget, and I'll tell you why. It's because that amount technically came from their wage, and now we're also booking it as an expense as well. Traditionally, employee deductions are put towards an accounts payable line and booked out of that and tracked through the balance sheet. There are a number of instances of this type of thing in our budget that I'm looking to shift to the balance sheet where it really should be living. And I'd like to do that at the calendar year.
Ken, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Is that something that only applies in the public works category, or we
No,
see that
we're
also
talking
in
about
finance
all
and
of
administration?
the
Okay.
departments that have it.
Okay.
There.
I wasn't clear, and I thought, is there something special about public works that requires this?
No, and
Okay.
that's a good point. It applies to every one of the similar type of line items that refer to budget employee deductions. Similar case goes for actually the health insurance itself. The employee health insurance deduction really should be booked also through their 5% shouldn't be included in our total. So we'll be making that change hopefully into this next budget period. There is also a new line created for signs and signposts and cones and traffic control. This is something that Jeff had asked that he could have so that he could keep better track of those expenses since he's starting to do a lot more of that activity. The line item itself, he put in a request for 4,000 in that.
Ken, should you put in, I thought you just gave a $13,000 estimate for the new parking regulations, so should we increase that line?
I think you're right. No disagreement there.
That'd be booked to capital, as a capital project, because it's,
Well, so here's,
it's a large, one-time project, you know, it's not like, I think he just wants that line item just set for like routine maintenance of.
are we gonna depreciate that asset though?
Somebody knocks over a stop sign and you replace it.
See,
Yeah.
usually we try to do capital projects that meet a certain both cost and depreciation threshold. So you don't necessarily want to depreciate every asset you have, like these tables. There's really no point in us depreciating that. So maybe purchasing the tables. This is something we should really talk about later, though, in terms of a capital expenditure policy and formalizing what will be treated as a capital expenditure versus an operational one. But I agree, we need to put that figure in here somewhere. So I'll talk to Jeff and we'll either figure it out in here or on the capital side. But in general, most of the capital projects and items like that will be depreciated, and when the bridge is done, we'll be adding that technically to our balance sheet, although I haven't seen our assets depreciated on a balance sheet, but it's supposed to be, so I'll check. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter too much because it doesn't affect our cash or anything like that.
And my recollection is that for something to be run through our capital fund, it has to be $15,000 or more. That's my.
Then that would sound logical.
No, I think it's 15,000, and Bob is shaking his head, and these are the kinds of things that.
Okay, and so then that's a good rule.
Yeah, I think we already have a rule in place for
Okay,
that.
so that's good to know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And you probably do, I just haven't come across it yet.
May not be written
Lasts
down.
a certain number of years, there are a couple.
Yeah, that's right,
stipulations.
yeah, and
We've booked a number of expenses out of capital that are under 15,000.
It might be 20,000.
Yeah, I think it was,
No, it was more than 25.
yeah, it's way more than 500.
we'll have to look it up.
Well, yeah, we'll have to, and maybe were they discrete things, or could you argue that they all belong together because
They were
all-
standalone costs, it wasn't part of like a larger project, so.
Okay, I don't know what to say about that, but I will do some digging and I will find that, because I'm sure I have that in
That
there.
was under Sean.
Well,
He
yeah,
started it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty sure Samantha continued that, so, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised, I noticed that a lot of policies have been adopted fairly recently, so.
So you did add a training and dues line item for Public Works. What do you envision that being? What does Jeff envision
Well,
that being?
the training and dues is really meant for sending people, association dues, like, different I'm not sure which associations are out here that specialize in public works.
There's a Public Works Association.
Well, there you have it.
And there's also lots of training that the guys can do for safety, like flagger training, safety with trenches, safety with, there's a whole number of courses that.
We don't do trenching.
Well, Mari, for example, went to a class related to repair of police vehicles because they're specialized. So now Mari is equipped now to do repairs to our police vehicles. Like he did the training. That's a good example.
Yeah. We could put association dues in there.
Just wanted to know what kind of training was envisioned.
I think it was probably shortened simply because there's only so much space that we can put in the descriptor line, but I'm happy to put that in there for you too. The road repairs and maintenance one is a significant one. Though the amount is only 10,000, the goal here is to try to do some more preventative type maintenance to basically extend the lifespan of the pretty decent roads we have. And we can do that with projects like crack filling and maybe even some chip sealing and other type of activities like that. Simple stuff like that can add 10, 15 years to a road surface and save us a lot of money from doing the more significant stuff. So the hope is to kind of build that program slowly, starting with the 10,000 there. The next significant item would be the street lighting and electrical repair. Since we did the LED conversion, the lights have become the borough's responsibility for repair. And there are a number apparently on the list that need some attention. So the idea there was to increase that to address some of those issues. The next item below that, an increase of 10,000 to the stormwater repair and maintenance, was just really to take a more proactive approach to dealing with some of the stormwater improvements that are doing street improvements and including some of those elements in there.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Is that included in that $30,000? I think we have 19 more compounds? But, I'm sorry?
You go ahead.
So do we include, let's say, like the engineering fees associated with where we're going to put those bump outs? So for example, public health and safety talked about using, 2 on Iona.
I think that's a separate line item.
Yeah, I think it's-
Stormwater, there's a stormwater item, I think.
Is there a
No,
storm?
we are talking
That's what I'm
about
talking
that.
I
about.
don't know, but there's another item,
This
line
is
item.
storm sewer repair.
I know I've seen it in the budget.
It's,
probably,
okay,
yeah.
it's in there somewhere.
There's a capital.
It seems to me like the
Capital.
scale and scope of that project would be capital anyway. And we would
Okay.
probably coincide that with, a
Engineering fees.
road works project. So
Okay.
if we're doing surfacing, that would be the ideal time for us to maybe implement a project like that. Or maybe even trench sewer if we had to replace something, which that is exceptionally expensive, but.
So the bump outs are in the capital, and then in that would be like the associated engineering fees and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm confirmed, it's in capital.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ken, what about, like, we have that pilot, the bump out, speed bump on Iona.
That's just the budget. It's a sure
Yes.
budget. Yeah.
So something like the speed hump that we have now in Iona,
Yeah,
that kind of thing be in here, or capital? Like if we wanted
I
to
think
do
what
another one?
what happened was that one, just the whole project in of itself, we coded it to capital, but we
Okay.
didn't really have it in the CIP.
Okay.
So it will be built in there after the fact. So the next item, or next section that is the Sabine campus. I don't have figures yet from Yentis to kind of confirm what's in here is where we're gonna be. A lot of them were just basically best guess estimates. Let's see, I guess like a 6.5% on real estate tax changes. That I'm gonna be able to calculate myself here, and I'll be able to get that in here without any issue. But that number is not yet correct either for real estate tax. So a lot of this stuff is just it's probably gonna change. On average, Yentis has increased its management cost by 7%, so that's what I just built in. But more to come on this later. And I'm pretty sure like electric and gas, the budget here is probably appropriate, probably could be less. I mean, you look at mid-year and we only spent 22,000, that's pretty impressive actually, considering the size of the facility. So we'll be looking at that. So expect a lot of the numbers in this section to be updated in the next edition. We have a lot of stuff crammed into the administration budget that related to the maintenance of the facility here, and I just thought it just makes sense to break that out in its own section rather than keep it with administration, because I just don't think it's a complementary function. So it's broken out here. There are some figures. I might actually roll in some line items for the community building. 80 Windsor in here. In terms of the repairs and stuff that need to be done in here, we need to do some repairs in the upstairs women's room because of some of the water damage from the previous air blower. Once that's done, for the most part, improvements in this building, there's nothing imminent. It's 80 Windsor that has the more imminent capital needs, and there is quite a bit of them, but most significantly would be the reinforcement of the roof. As you all know, was 2021 when a portion of the ceiling caved in the library, and at that time they had discovered that there were structural problems with the roof, and specifically in terms of how its weight is distributed. I don't know if you've all seen it, but it's actually a slate roof, so it is very heavy. And the structure rests only on the exterior walls of the original wings. So the original library, that's the front part of it, and the two halls on the side both have the same structural issue. But once you go past the doorway in the library, the two doors, you are in a different aged part of the library that doesn't have this roof structure problem. So I have spoken with the engineer on this project. He does believe it is very imminent that we need to take action and do some improvements. Before my arrival, Yerkes was retained to evaluate and come up with a plan and design for structuring and basically firming up the building. That design work is now pretty much complete and bid documents have been prepared. I do not know if this ever came before the council. I know it is a significant project. My intention is to bring it to you in its entirety and have a good discussion on it because it's important and it is kind of imperative. I was told that we need to be concerned about any snow load on that building in terms of allowing occupancy. That's not a very good sign. So we really do need to find a way to act. And I know right now this budget doesn't give us a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to fit it. But I think once we start working all this stuff together, maybe we can actually put together a picture that works. The estimated cost of this project, and it is rough, $350,000 to $400,000. Now, whether or not we have money remaining we have two sources of funds that exist right now that we could possibly use towards this. We have the $250,000 state grant through the state share account, I believe is what it's called. Those funds were acquired mostly to address the HVAC system and some ADA improvements. But that was also pulled with another $625,000 that we had borrowed already. And that money has been sitting in one of our funds. It's been drawn on for a few of the projects, but put that together, that's kind of our pool of money to maybe address this project and not have to take out any additional loans. Now, whether or not there's enough capacity between that, it's tight. We may have to come up with a little bit of the difference. Maybe it bids low and then we're in great shape. But that's to come. That's a fair project of significance.
Fred, if I may.
Yeah.
So the last time that project came to the infrastructure committee, they didn't have to replace the roof. They were going to do all the repairs internally by putting up like some additional supports inside the building.
It's expensive. Logistically, it could take up to a month of closure, if not more.
Right.
It's true, it's not going to be overly invasive. It's basically going to be structural framing that are going to be done on the walls, the exterior walls of each of the units, the main units.
No, but that's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, are we still talking about doing that, or are we talking about replacing the roof?
That's what it is we're shoring it up. And I did ask the question.
So we're not replacing the roof?
No, I asked them,
okay, that's
it's a good question, because I asked, well, if we switched to, let's say, regular shingled roof that isn't as heavy, would this be a less costly alternative? And I was told that this alternative is still less costly than replacing.
Yeah, I believe that.
Which didn't actually surprise me after they explained to me the logistics involved with removing the slate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when do you expect to bring that to council?
Very soon. Actually, I literally got the documents this week.
Okay.
So
have you been talking to the library about the logistics of doing this? Okay.
So they're aware of the nature of the project and the extent of it. I put in a little bit in the library budget to help them with some of the expense. Only maybe one or two of their stacks might have to be altered to fit these posts. So I put a little bit of money in there for them on that. We also, Jeff and I spoke with them a little bit about helping them with any relocation stuff that they might need during that period. Speaking to the engineer, it was pretty clear that we could continue to use, the children's side of the library, that part of the addition, all that roof is stable, including the restrooms. It's just the moment you go from the kitchen areas out into the halls and stuff like that, that's where the structure is not as sound. And obviously, it appears to be most deteriorated in the library wing, but it wouldn't surprise me if we had something happen in the other two, in one of the other two.
And to be clear, they're safe now, it's just.
No, it's
the
structural.
potential for snow.
It
heavy
is
snow on
safe
it.
to occupy the building, it's just if there was a snow load,
Right.
they say we shouldn't allow occupancy of the building. And that to me is a good sign that we should not hold off on acting on this to the extent we can.
I think they're referring to like a blizzard, like Winter Storm Jonas or something.
Yeah, like a
Yeah.
foot of snow sitting on it.
Yeah,
Well,
we
I
got no
don't
snow
know,
last year, so.
But,
Yeah.
I don't know how much snow was on it the last time it failed in 21. But
You have to shovel the roof if that happens.
I don't think we can. I don't know if it's safe to go on the roof when it has a snow load, for the very reason that we're talking about. So anyway, this will be a later discussion for you. That's coming.
Okay.
Aside from that, obviously, the biggest project, priority one, the bridge. Right now, our total project estimate is $9,582,169. That's the total estimate with a 10% contingency. And where we're at right now, we are finalizing a solution here with Pico on the location of a connection to the little gym off of Narberth Avenue next to the bridge. The electrical source that goes into that building needs to be relocated, primarily because the overhead lines are being removed. So we're working with the landowner to have a relocation of that done and included in the final plans. And now, once those plans are finalized, we should be able to finalize all of our contracts with all of the utilities, which leads us right down to the very last one, and that's Amtrak. We're still working with Amtrak. We're trying to get them to primarily, and this is the big one, lower their insurance requirement. Right now, they require us to produce $10 million in liability coverage, which is the far limits of what we can obtain through our mutual pooled self-insurance trust. Going any higher than that, and I don't even know how we would obtain that level of insurance. They're not really on the hook for that full amount. Their contract and their rules, and it pretty much indemnify them to like almost a $2 million level. So we're not really quite sure as to why they're demanding that amount of insurance coverage. We're trying to get that lowered. I talked to John Wilco earlier this week. We sent out a message to Amtrak stating our concerns about the contract and the insurance levels, and that our request to have them lowered to a more reasonable level, even $5 million would be preferable. $2 million even better, because then that fits within our current policy and we don't have to take out additional coverage. So that's problem one. Problem two is the 30% deposit that Amtrak requires from us. Now, the part of the project that will involve Amtrak has a different dollar amount out of that 9.5 million. And that amount, their total, is $5,195,377. And they are asking for a 30% deposit, which is a $1.6 million approximately cash deposit that we leave with them over the course of the project And what would happen is, as the project goes, they'll deduct from it as if it's an escrow, and once it's exhausted, then they submit for payment. But they'll do it proportionately through the project. Now, our goal was to look at this in a couple different ways. One, we could use it as a way to utilize restricted funds, and then once they're done in their use, they'll become free from restriction. However, of course, we do have a substantial amount of debt, so whether or not we actually want to carry a debt that we don't need raises a good question. So we're talking with them about the possibility of seeing if they'll lower that percentage deposit, perhaps down to 5%, which would basically match their level of risk from us, because we are responsible for 5%, the state 15, the federal 80. So that's kind of where we're at. Once we are able to finalize that contract, then we'll be at the point where we'll potentially be ready to bid. So I mean, it's actually looking pretty promising here that we're making this much progress. So that's kind of where that stands. And so we'll be figuring out that project, the roof stabilization project. And then there's also semi-unrelated in terms of capital, but still capital, the fuels fund. We had planned to do some road surfacing, and Jeff has a proposal for that. Most likely, if I recall the area, would be Haverford Avenue from Montgomery to, I want to say Shirley Road, somewhere over there. That's probably where we have our most deteriorated road surface at this point. So that project to come, but that's just to give you a taste of what we have in terms of capital. Is there anything I'm missing in terms of the capital projects that we were looking at?
Somebody let me get in Zoom.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So
Jeff texted, he said Iona.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that
okay.
doesn't make sense
All
to Charlotte, okay.
Sorry, Jeff, thanks for catching me. This is why I.
Jeff, if you want to join, you can unmute yourself if you want to
And
comment.
that paving project would be paid for out of liquid fuel money, which is
Correct.
dedicated money, so it's not,
Right.
we already have it.
Yeah,
It has
won't
to be
affect-
used for the roads, so.
And we keep that segregated, so it won't really affect any of your other capital activity. The green initiative fund that we created is still not fully created. It had a budget created, but no money has been transferred into it. The accounting book ledger that was created for it wasn't set up correctly, but there really wasn't any entry in it but the budget.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the Green Initiative Fund, are you talking about the fund, John?
No, this is what, with Samantha, we established a separate fund so that, remember when we had a line item for climate action?
Yeah,
And this way it could roll over, if it's not used in 1 year, it can roll over to next year, if it's a separate fund, if it's outside the general fund. That was my understanding.
Yes, and that we would kind of like tax ourselves for anything that
Right.
was fuel related.
The internal carbon tax.
Well, none of that had been fully set up, so we're gonna be working on figuring out how to set that up. There is a deficit for that fund, which I'll be working on trying to come up with a solution. Consider that deficit a negative number out of your capital fund. It's just, but once we get it balanced, everything should be fine. And it's just a simple deficit because I think a lot of transfers were just deferred and nobody put together a plan to see it through.
So we've been tracking green fund expenses. We've been putting due from green fund, so we know when as we're setting it up with like the account, we'll know like what needs to go to that. So we
yeah.
are tracking it, like those expenses.
Yeah, we should think of another name, I guess, now that we have fungi.
Yeah.
Friends of Green, Narberth Green Initiatives. That's true, yeah. So that's why it might be helpful to.
Well,
Rename it.
I'll leave it to the council to direct me on what name you would like to refer to it as. I will refer to it then as Fund 70, because that is the number designated, until you decide on
That
But-
sounds ominous.
I know.
70, I don't know.
And Black Ops budget.
Seriously, I don't know about that.
Well, I'll call it the green fund.
There we go.
Yes. So that's kind of where things are at. There are still a few projects, and in terms of identifying some of where the funds are kind of settled. It's not that I can't account for the activity. It's just some of the activity was done in different funds when it should have just been done in the one. And because of that, I just got to figure out, okay, this is what we need to transfer over to here. Get that right. But in the meantime, once I figure out that figure, and I'm very close to that, we'll have everything set in terms of the full budget picture. The next thing too will then come, I think a little bit more of a sophisticated capital planning process that I'm looking to do with just a little bit more predictiveness and some more long-range thinking. You're not committed to it, but I think it's just very helpful for organizations with limited resources to be able to look at that stuff long range, because it makes a lot of things more feasible and you're able to push it out over time. So that's to come. I know I kind of deviated a little bit from here, but it coincides a lot with the next item on the list here, which is debt service. Now, President Bush and I had a conversation just before the meeting, kind of figuring out the conditions of one of our bond issues and the possibility that we may be able to avoid continuing that debt, or maybe just using a portion of it as we need, thus reducing that very large $217,000 payment potentially, which is a very good thing. The debt difference here is still significant, but if we can bring down a lot of these payments, we might be able to work something that has fairly limited impact if possible. So the goal is to kind of approach a funding plan for the projects we just discussed with as limited of impact as we can. So utilizing as little of that new debt. And when I'm talking about the new debt, I'm talking about the 2022C. It's a GO bond issue, but it was kind of set up like a line of credit. The funds are actually not in our possession. They are held at the bank in a separate account, ready for us to draw upon when needed. The borrowing was based on the premise that we didn't know what was going to happen with the Sabine building, and there might be some other imminent failure. I've since had an opportunity to talk to Yentis, and I visited the facility, and I don't think we're in that urgent situations. I was able to talk to our bond counsel, who indicated we can purpose those funds towards facilities, because that's the way the bond had been issued, the wording. So we have a lot of flexibility, and so the hope is we can figure out a way to maybe reduce that obligation but still cover everything that we're looking to accomplish. So there may be an answer here. So the number, when we go down here, and I should just note, the fire company did request the $40,000 towards fire equipment, and I can go a little bit over their request, but
We've done that 40,000 every year for the fire equipment fund, so that's not an issue.
So yeah, the deficit you're seeing here is not going to be the final number that we're going to be working with, and ultimately I think that number is going to come down pretty substantially. I'd like to work with the department heads too, and we'll try to tighten up the budget a little bit and see what we can come back with that kind of makes it a little bit easier to close the gap. But in terms of capital equipment, I can kind of go over a little bit of what has been requested next year. Public Works is looking
Ken, let me pause you. Since we don't have that document, maybe we should save that for another time.
Okay.
Once you've got it
Sure.
written down, we can,
Absolutely.
we can go over it.
All right.
But I think it'd work a lot better if we actually have the request in front of us. when we
It makes
discuss
sense, yes. So,
And just to talk a little more about the debt service that Ken was mentioning. So this is a $1.5 million drawdown. Depending on what we need to pay for the bridge deposit and what these other projects are going to do, we may need to draw down all of it or none of it. So if we draw down none of it, that Series 2022 C expense is zero essentially. If we draw down all of it, then the debt service is $217,000 next year. So it's really going to depend on how much money we're going to need to do the bridge project is going to drive most of it. And as Ken said, the repairs to the library are also urgent. So those two projects I think are going to drive a lot of whether we need to draw down that money. But at the moment, we have not drawn down that money, so that expense is kind of a worst case scenario.
I think, ultimately, as long as we have enough liquidity, we should be able to cash flow our 5% in a way during the course of the project that it will work. But I have to run some math and just kind of see how that plays out. There is a better way for us to structure our accounts so that we don't have to have multiple checking accounts. The funds are all under our responsibility and we book them separately. So they do not need to be booked, they don't need separate checking accounts so long as they are in our accounting system and tracked independently. So by doing that, we might have the liquidity to be able to float some of this stuff on our own without having to borrow. So that I'm going to be looking at some of the ways to maybe approach it that way, and that could probably save us quite a bit of money.
And we should still have a substantial general fund balance at the end of this year. Right, as far as,
we should be doing well at the end of the year. I think my prediction, I think it's going to be somewhere around 250,000
surplus.
A surplus.
Right, and that's to go on top of the $1 million that we had in the general fund last year, right? So that would give us 1.2 million.
So if you're aiming for your 20% fund balance, and your expenses going up, so that minimum fund balance is gonna go a little higher, but yeah, we should be able to maintain our 20% and maybe a little bit over that. And what is ever over that, I would recommend you move that to your capital. Because usually what your fund balance rule does, it allows you to establish what you need bare minimum to make operations. And then, the rest, you can say, okay, we'll push this off towards, the larger savings or the capital needs that we're gonna focus on.
All right. Any other budget questions at this time?
I guess the one question I would just have is, how soon do you expect a next iteration of this? So should we wait to do more, does it make sense for us to wait to do an in-depth review of this? Because we got this pretty close to the meeting tonight.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because a lot of the numbers will change.
That's what I was wondering.
I will try to send you out updated versions prior to any meetings so you guys can just look over them, because I know it's to your benefit to individually be able to just have an opportunity to look at what's coming. I should note that there are other revenues that we can anticipate coming that haven't been denoted as part of this budget. We have not yet obtained our grant for 3 Elmwood. I'm going to be working on that here possibly next week to sort that out and see if we get our funds for that. So there's $500,000 coming for that. There's obviously the possible potential sale of property that we're talking about. So there are some other revenue streams that are going to be coming, one-time ones. And one-time revenue streams are great for capital projects, not so great for offsetting operations, but they're good opportunities to use in that way. So we'll be coming up with a plan that kind of encompasses those things as well.
What is the timeline for the capital budget?
I'm hoping I have something ready for you for your next meeting. that's the plan. I'm going into crunch time, and hopefully if we hire our bookkeeper here, who's eager to start as early as next week, which is fantastic, we can start rolling a lot quicker because she can spend more time verifying my work, sure the accuracy, while I go ahead and carry out the research and finish a lot of the stuff that needs to be filled in. You don't need the familiarity to know that a number doesn't add up correctly, so, and she should be able to help greatly with that. And of course, Fred's been a big help too with his institutional knowledge and his help going through the budget. So Fred, thank you so much for the help going through the material. I'll certainly look to you for a few things as we go along the way, but I'm starting to get a clear picture now. It's just, it took me a little bit to come across some of the other things that I needed. They weren't online. I found something in a drawer that I found that was actually kind of helpful. So, you know, where we find things, I don't know, but it's coming together, and so I'm hoping here in 2 weeks you'll have something else to look at and something more comprehensive.
So in the past, you know, council has directed sort of budget questions to the chair of the F&A committee to discuss at the F&A meeting. I don't know if we're in a position to do that right now.
I think we should keep it all closed.
Okay, so we will proceed to the, you know, we'll have the next discussion at the next meeting, and then we'll figure out from there sort of how to get to the home stretch.
I was thinking that would be a good idea. I think at F&A, we could still kind of talk a little bit about how we intend to structure financing the longer range picture. I think that would be helpful to have a discussion there. And that's ready to go, and I think pretty close now, but.
All right, so just in terms of timeline, I think we'll have the remaining pieces of the budget you can present on in 2 weeks, right? And then I think for our workshop meeting, we will plan to, you know, kind of take a last look at line items, any items that we think should be dropped or added, and then we'll have our vote in November at the business meeting on the budget itself. So, does that sound good to everybody? Yeah. Okay. Compresses our timeline a bit, but you know, I think there aren't that many new requests in the budget this year. Most of it is we're already staffed. You know, at the moment we don't seem to have a lot of new requests that are causing concerns, which would be where we would step in. The trash contract is outside of the budget. It's its own. I mean, it is a fund, but it is not funded by.
It's an enterprise activity, just like your sewer fund.
It's not when we have a lot. I mean, once we put out the RFP, we don't have a lot of control over it.
Absolutely, I'm just thinking of the timing.
We will want to have appropriate timing in order for us to bill it as a fee, as we typically do on our tax statements. We bill both solid waste and sewer fees in that way. We don't have to. We could independently bill, but this has been our practice.
Well, this has just become our practice. This is a recent change.
Okay. Well, the other option to do is you could also independently bill it. We could do an accounts receivable setup where we send out statements and take payments. With the staffing level that we'll have, there's no problem with us being able to handle that type of volume, especially since we only bill once a year, at least based on our current rate structure.
I'm a little confused now, because when I get I don't escrow my property taxes, so I get my property tax bill, and the solid waste and sewer is on the property tax bill with the Narberth Borough tax.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
I forgot.
So it's yeah, so when you said they were, I'm like, well, I don't think they're separate. So, you know, Regina is creating that for us and sending it out, and so I don't know that I would suggest that we do anything separate unless.
I'm not suggesting.
We do have to for those properties that are not subject to tax.
That's different.
And we will be doing that and setting all of that up to make sure we do that. But I didn't suggest a change.
Well, it sounded like Fred
I
did.
didn't either, I made a mistake, I'm wrong.
And I'm like,
You can ignore
whoa,
what I
that
said.
sounds like a lot of work.
You can ignore what I just said,
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not proposing it.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna be billing, like, we already handled it through the taxes.
Right, that's what, I
Yeah.
know, but it's, yeah.
I get where you're going, cause I thought the same thing, I was like, that's not
Can't
where
be
we're
what it
going.
means.
Yeah,
My question is just in timing and, you know, we've heard, expect trash contracts to go up 50%. Right, so that cost is going to extend to households. Right, so as we are looking at what is the tax rate, what do we do with an EIT, I would like to have some sense of how much will our solid waste fees go up? Because it gives a context of how we're affecting individual households, that's all. I was wondering at the timing of that trash up.
We are, so it's on the agenda, we're gonna, hopefully, you know, we're, if
Ideally,
we approve it tonight and it goes out,
tomorrow.
well, soon.
Yeah, we'll
next week.
Well, we'll schedule it tomorrow.
It goes out soon, the deadline that you put on it is November.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
we should have a
we're
sense at our November
We're
workshop.
looking at a 4-week turnaround.
Right,
Yeah,
we should have bids by our November workshop meeting, so
Have a sense.
we'll have a sense at that point.
And then we don't have, if we had to extend a vote on the budget to wait for those figures.
We'll have it before our vote on the budget,
Yeah,
for sure.
because that wouldn't be.
Vote on the budget's at the business meeting, so this will be 2 weeks before our business
Okay.
meeting. We will know for sure
Okay.
the solid waste costs before our budget vote. Any other questions on budget presentation? Or budget timing or the process? Okay. All right. Thank you, Ken. I'm actually gonna propose that we turn on the air conditioning again for these action items. I'll be loud when I read item C. Okay. Action item 8A is a hiring confirmation. So to speak up. I'm good. I'd like to make a motion.
I move we confirm the hiring of Kathleen George as bookkeeper.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right. Ken or Alan, would you like to say anything about this?
Yeah, so we did manage to get a fairly decent pool of candidates. Kathleen obviously stood out as a pretty strong candidate. She's eager to get started. We've been working with her very recently about our pre-employment requirements necessary for her to get through the contingent selection. But generally the role will be mostly focused on helping with financial related matters, but also assisting customers and other things, and also some projects that we'll be delegating over the course of what we're going to do. So I hope you have an opportunity to meet Kathleen. You probably will. She'll probably make an appearance, possibly with our budget process. We'll see.
Also stop by the office anytime.
Of course. Well, you'll know Paul, but you'll have to meet Kathleen. I'm sure Paul wouldn't mind yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about her background, what experience she brings to the borough?
Well, she's been in bookkeeping and finance for 10 years. Right now, she's in the middle of obtaining a master's degree in accounting. So she comes with quite a bit of experience. She's got a lot of background in office administration. She has a notary business. So she'll fill a lot of that experience. So she's got a lot of great background that's very complementary to what we do in the office. So we're eager to have her start.
Any other questions? All right, we're voting to confirm the hiring of Kathleen George as the bookkeeper administrative assistant. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's 6-0. 8B.
I move that Borough confirm the hiring of Paul Frosch as the records clerk office assistant.
Second.
Okay. Ken, anything else to add about?
Well, I'm not sure I have to introduce Paul to you. He's been our parking controller for a little over a year and a half. He's eager to take on new things and wanted to take on the direction of working in administration, so we're happy to have him on board. He's got a lot of great skills with people, good writer. Just brings a lot of fantastic things to our operation, so we're looking forward to having him.
It's my understanding Paul will be working to answer daytime questions regarding police questions. Paul has a background as a police officer down 10. So he's got a great manner with the public. Very cordial, very friendly. It's perfect.
You're right, Mayor. And both of the new positions will be responsible for helping connect either walk-ins or callers to the officers. And particularly, it's not to take report or anything, it's really just to get them to the officer. You guys all know non-emergency calls, 911, people aren't comfortable with that, and so our hope is that it makes our officers more approachable and they don't complain that an officer didn't answer the phone, because we'll make that connection for them. So that's the hope.
So the non-emergency police member will ring through their desks if they're.
Well, obviously emergency, we still want people to dial that.
Yes,
Right.
non-emergency.
And if we had that situation, we wanted to get them connected with the communications center. But, if somebody's got a non-emergency situation, they want to talk to an officer, that officer's typically out in the field, we'll forward that call out to them, and then we don't have to, worry about people having that skittishness of dialing 911, which is understandable.
All right, we are voting to confirm the hiring of Paul Frosch as the records clerk office assistant. All those in favor? It's unanimous, 6-0. All right, 8C.
Who wants to make that motion?
I can't make a
Accept the resignation of Council Vice President Michelle Papadopoulos. A second with great regret.
Yeah, so Michelle couldn't be here tonight, so I will read her resignation letter. Dear Mayor, Council members, and Borough Manager, I write to announce my resignation from Narberth Borough Council. It is with a mix of gratitude and regret that I make this decision, as it has been an honor to serve alongside all of you. As I think most of you are aware, I started a new chapter in my life last year, which initially seemed manageable in terms of balancing my professional responsibilities and duties as an elected official, while also caring for my family. Regrettably, as time progressed, the demands and responsibilities of my new position have intensified significantly. Despite my best efforts, I find myself frequently encountering unavoidable conflicts between my professional commitments, responsibility to my children, and the duties that come with serving on council. I've come to the realization that I cannot fulfill the obligations of a council member to the extent that the borough deserves, while meeting my professional and personal responsibilities. Therefore, it is with deep regret that I must step down, recognizing that Narberth needs a council member who can devote the necessary time and effort to serve the community effectively. Serving as a council member has been a transformative experience for me. It has allowed me to witness the passion and dedication within our council and borough administration, as well as the commitment of our residents. I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to each of you and to the residents of Narberth for your support and trust throughout my tenure. With your continued dedication, Narberth will thrive and continue to be a remarkable place to live, work, and play. I have the utmost confidence in Council's ability to lead Narberth toward an even brighter future. Thank you once again for your support, understanding, and the privilege of serving alongside all of you. It has been an honor, and I will cherish the moments we shared and the impact we made together. With sincere appreciation and warm regards, Michelle Papadopoulos.
I'd like to just say thank you to Michelle for her tireless work and the hours that she put in on behalf of the citizens of this borough to take care of everything. We were honored to have her, and we thank her so much for her efforts and wish her the best.
As vice, as the vice president of council, I've come to rely on her opinion and her wisdom at dealing with all kinds of scenarios that have come up. And Michelle, thank you for all that you've done, and wish you the best. Anyone else? Thanks again, Michelle. We're now voting to accept the resignation of Council Vice President Michelle Patanopoulos. All those in favor? With regret.
With regret, yeah. We don't want to do
It is unanimous. All right, so I will note that our acceptance of this resignation triggers a process that will result in us appointing a new member of council at our next workshop meeting in November. We will be publicizing this, but for members of the public who are Narberth residents, who have been Narberth residents for a year, it's a requirement for serving on council. You may submit an application to join Borough Council. Michelle's term runs for another 2 years. And there will be more details on the website.
Yeah, we're going to post the vacancy on the website.
We'll post the vacancy on the website and through our email newsletter. So we look forward to applicants to join the Borough Council. All right, so now that we no longer have a vice president, I will accept nominations for the role of council vice president.
I would like to nominate Cindy Ricketts for the role of vice president.
Okay. Are there further nominations for vice president? Second. We do need a second.
So for nominations, you don't actually need a second for nominations. You just ask for the nominations, and then you vote on the candidates in order that they were nominated. And the first person that has the majority is then elected.
Okay. That was kind of what I remember, but it's good to have that clarified.
Yeah.
All right. So we've had one nomination of Councilman Ricketts. Are there any other nominations? Okay. I close the floor for nominations. Discussion? So,
I'm thankful that Cindy is willing to take on this role for us.
Yeah, and I think of the council members currently sitting, I think Cindy is the longest sitting. Is that correct? And the most senior.
Yeah, I mean, you have the most experience, and I appreciate your institutional knowledge and your government experience, and also just your knowledge of the community. And I also had a tremendous respect for Michelle, but I know you did the job too.
I mean, one of the important roles of vice president is to not to be afraid to tell the president when they think the president's making a mistake. I'm confident in your ability to let me know when you think I'm making mistakes.
My husband's on with
All right, let's vote on the Cindy Ricketts to be appointed council vice president. All those in favor? You can vote for yourself. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for stepping forward. And I'll note that we will have a vote again at our reorganizational meeting in January. So both for president and for vice president. So this is going to be for the rest of this week. Okay, action item 8E.
I move to accept the extension for 714 Montgomery Ave and the due to January 31st, 2000.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. I believe this is a fairly routine extension. Is there any discussion?
Letter look like all the extension letter requests we get, so.
Yes. All right, we're voting to accept the extension for 714 Montgomery Plan Review. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Yes.
Yeah,
I know, me too, because I can never remember
this is the Price House, they're still working on getting it back together. Last action item, 8F, RFP for trash.
I move that Borough Council approve the revised request for proposals for trash and recycling collection services.
Second.
Okay. So, context here, I'll provide a little bit, which is that after we had our discussion and approved the RFP at our last meeting, it was discovered that the draft that had been used, or the basis for that RFP was not our most recent trash RFP. And when I looked at our most recent trash RFP, the definitions were improved. There was some service there that was not in the old RFP. So I made the decision that we should revise our request based on the most recent RFP and bring it back to council. So this is based on the most recent document that Assistant Manager Matt West prepared in 2018, I believe, end of 2018. Some of the council members here, I think, voted on at that time. However, there may have been some inconsistencies due to the way this has happened. We may need to make a couple of minor changes to this one as well. So, Barbara, I think you had some.
Yeah, I had a few places where I just wanted to make sure we were in sync on what we were saying. So, let's see. This is on page 11 in the scope of work section. Item 2, B and C. I didn't know if maybe they could be combined in some way, because I think what we're doing there is saying, item B is saying, every week, there's weekly collection of 90 gallons of brush and yard waste. And then item C says there's once a week collection of leaves, starting with the last week in October until the end of the second full week of December. And I'm sure the intention of that is that there might be, you might have more than 90 gallons in the leaf falling time. But calling out the, back in the day, we had a different schedule for leaf collection from yard waste. And I feel like this is somehow keeping that structure a little bit. So I didn't know if maybe we could say that the 90 gallon maximum is removed during this, from the last week of October until the second full week in December or whatever, so that leaves can be collected. I just was it made it almost sound like there were separate collections, brush and yard waste from leaf collection. And I don't know.
Well, they are kind of like, my understanding, and I could be very wrong on this, but they will be like different type of collection.
They're across different places.
No, they're not. When people put their yard waste, most yard waste is put into
So
paper
we're
bags,
saying
just like leaves.
This would be part of the same collection.
Yeah.
When they're coming through, it's just gonna be yard
It's
waste.
just that you're allowed to have more of it put out.
You're going to put out a lot more than 90 gallons if
If you've got a lot of
if you have
trees.
15 leaf bags or something.
Well, we can combine B and C and just say,
That,
between the months of October and December.
Leaves will not count toward this 90 gallon.
yeah, that could be, yeah, it could be something like that. Yeah.
Leaves may also be placed and will not count toward the 90 gallon.
Yeah.
That sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah, and-
quantity of leaves can
Right,
exceed
and-
the 90 gallon.
yeah. And so
Okay.
I just thought that would be a little clearer to people. This is just a question that I was like, because I wasn't sure. When I read through the bulk item, it lists the bulk, what isn't included as a bulk item. And one of the things is anything that would weigh less than 40 pounds. I was like, is that because we're saying that's just regular trash?
Yeah.
Okay, because when I read it, I was like, wait, should that say anything that would weigh more than 40 pounds? I didn't
You're
know.
limited to one bulk item.
Right, so-
Things that are
but-
under 40 pounds are not.
Right, but we're not trying to put a maximum weight on the bulk item. That was the thing that I wasn't sure about. I was like, that can't be right, because if you can put out furniture, there's gonna be some furniture that weighs more than 40 pounds. So I just want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Yeah.
I think it's fine, I just wanted to make sure, you know,
So I don't think that
that
needs any
something
change.
got, yeah.
Yeah.
On page 19, in the bid proposal form, number 7, for all properties except multifamily properties over 10 units, 1 unit of waste will include 1 to 2 96-gallon containers. I think that's supposed to say just 1.
It's already been corrected.
Oh,
The
okay.
version that's in the packet's, got that, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then addendum A, which is on page 33, describes the annual spring cleanup event and, you know, what that entails. I didn't see that anywhere, referred to anywhere in the scope of work or the bid proposal.
So in the bid proposal, they asked for an item for spring cleanup, and it says see addendum A for
Oh,
description.
where is that in there? I couldn't find it, and I didn't print out all of that section, so. Can you tell me where that is in there, and I'll, just so I can.
I don't have control over the document.
Okay,
Scroll.
all right. Let me go.
Page 19.
Page 19?
Yeah.
Wait, am I like totally blind?
It could be called the light mortar. I mean, I added it in there because I was wondering where else it was
Oh, it's
mentioned.
item D. I didn't even, see, I just
Yeah.
looked at those and said, oh, good, there's all 4 years in there. My apologies.
Okay.
I got it. I'm good. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, that was it.
Did anyone else have any issues they wanted to raise about that revised RFP?
You have in here the reporting that we wanted, you know, I think it's weekly reporting.
Yeah, like I said, this should be very similar to what we currently have in place, so.
Well, but we wanted to change again, apartment dwellings, dumpsters, fees, I mean, there's some
Right, so
really
is that-
substantive changes.
Because that's been
Well,
reflected.
the fees themselves, that's something that we're doing on the side in terms of how we're structuring the rates. We're gonna have to come back and talk about the rates because, see if that fits what your vision is. Otherwise, we built into the ordinance, a resolution provision that you can set those rates and structure them the way you desire. So what we'll do is we'll try to put it and distribute it the way you have it and see if that's to your satisfaction.
That's in the solid waste ordinance, that's not an RFP.
Oh, right.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
what we need from this is to find out the costs, essentially. And so we've given them all the data on units.
We have a list of all the properties. One of the things that's not in here is a list of all the properties in the borough, so they'll get that. That will include the commercial properties as well, right, and apartments. Any other comments on it? Okay. Alan, you've got, you can clean that up for tomorrow and get it out tomorrow next week?
Yeah, probably, well, we have to, I think we have to publish it in the newspaper.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it has to be
Whenever it's
Yeah,
published.
next week, yeah.
And you've got the list of properties ready there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's vote to approve the revised RFP. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. And thanks for cleaning, changing this after we initially approved it. I realize that it's extra work for you all, but
And it's gotta be what you guys want, so.
appreciate that. Okay. Committee reports, infrastructure.
So we didn't meet, but Ken, during his budget presentation, covered the Jimmy Island, the bridge and the library.
Yeah, those are the major infrastructure projects we've got.
Yeah, and then it's hard to find something that's more urgent than those two.
So you probably won't meet it, if we're getting the library project at the workshop, at the business meeting, you will not meet before that, right? We'll meet after the business meeting.
We meet at the end of the month.
All right, finance administration.
It's budget season, we did this, we've been working on a valuation tool. At our next meeting, we'll review the opportunities and schedule.
Public health and safety?
Yeah, we meet next week, and so we haven't met since our last meeting.
Okay.
Wait a second.
Okay. All right. Announcements for the good of council. All right. Before we adjourn, we will have an executive session to discuss personnel matter and disposition of borough-owned property at 230 Haverford. It is possible that we will come back into session. I don't believe so. Okay. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay, is there a second? All right, all those in favor of adjournment? Okay. We're going to adjourn. I didn't see that. All right, that is unanimous.